Well, and they're going to need this pass rush, this defensive line to be good, especially by the time they get to the Red River Showdown. We're going to give you our outlook of that game. And can the Oklahoma Sooners go back-to-back and beat Texas? We'll discuss coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So it's the game that matters the most, no matter what marquee matchups you have on the schedule, no matter what the records are, no matter who's projected to be the top of the conference and who's not. It's OU Texas, the Red River Showdown. It's the Cotton Bowl. It's hundreds of thousands of people descending upon South Dallas to be a part of the Red River Showdown. Now, Jay, this is one of those games that going into last season, there was a projected mismatch on paper. Everybody expected Texas to be better than Oklahoma. Going into this season, it's the same thing. Everybody's projecting Texas to be much better than Oklahoma. Texas being considered one of the top 4 teams in the country. Oklahoma just outside the top 15 in the USA Today coaches poll. We'll see where they land in the AP top 25 when it releases on Monday. What's your feeling on this game? We're about 2 months away from it.
So we both have questions on both sides, right? You know, Texas has a lot of questions when it comes to their secondary, their pass rush, right? I mean, you know, you got the young guy in Colin Simmons, which we know is a really good dude, and linebacker Anthony Hill, which I hope that he just sits out the game just because, you know, I don't want to be injured. I don't want to be hurt. I just don't want him to play because he actually is really good. So they've got some pieces, but you still got questions, especially like say, that interior defense. You know, Jermaine Lole went there specifically because he knew he was going to be able to play there immediately. There wasn't a guarantee here at Oklahoma. Texas, they needed him, so they got him, Bill Norton from Arizona. He followed his coach from Arizona over whenever, you know, that entire staff kind of blew up. And so, to me, I really think that Oklahoma has a really good chance of going back-to-back in this one, mainly because we're returning so much experience on the defensive side of the ball. We really did give Quinn Ewers fits last season. Like, granted, he still was able to finish it over 300 yards, but for the most part, he was being terrorized. And if we didn't give them that punt, that terrible play calling lead to them blocking that punt for a touchdown, we would have went up like 2 scores late in that game. And yeah, I think the defense was prepared for him at that point. So not saying that, you know, ifs, buts, candies, and nuts, you know, we don't have a Merry Christmas type deal or revising anything. I do believe that the stoutness of this defense is what's going to carry us to be able to have a victory in this game. Their offensive line is good, but I ask you, do we really think that their offensive line is going to be able to stop our defense from ever getting to Quinn? Because last year they didn't play Max until second half, and we saw what happened.
Yeah, so Oklahoma was able to get to Quinn Ewers. They were able to create enough stops in the run game. You know, Jonathan Brooks had his yards, Quinn Ewers had his yards, but Oklahoma made enough splash plays, both Ethan Downs getting 2 sacks, creating, you know, tackles for loss, especially the goal line stand, right? The goal line stand is, I think, what a lot of us point to as the moment where we started to see Brent Venables' defense come to fruition, right?
Yep.
And I think
that was the play.
Yeah, and I think most people would argue, whether you're Oklahoma, whether you're a national writer, whether you're a Texas fan, that Oklahoma's defense going into this year is actually better than what it was last year. And so if that's the case, okay, maybe Texas is able to rack up a lot of yards, but they weren't able to win, and they needed a special teams touchdown. Oklahoma got the interception on the first play of the game. They got another interception on big hit from Billy Bowman's to Jatavian Sanders and intercepted by Kendall Dolby. And so, like, I have a hard time just assuming that Texas is going to win this one because they're ranked higher. I've said for months I think Oklahoma still wins this game, and I'm going to double down, triple down, quadruple down on that. Oklahoma's going to win this game because I think they're still better defensively than Texas. I think the offense is going to be good enough to score points on Texas's defense, even though they've got good players. I think that Oklahoma's offense is still going to be good enough. And I do have questions about the skill position talent, even though they've got an Isaiah Bond. Who else do they have?
Yeah, see, and with that, it's because they had to replace their entire wide receiver room, right? They still got Jonte Cook, who's the only returning wide receiver really with catches on the team, but they replaced him with, they had added three more transfer guys. Now, the transfer guys are probably going to be very solid for them, but they're still coming in trying to figure out things and learn things, right? Good thing is Sarkisian's offensive guy, so it shouldn't be too much of a learning curve, but you still got to create your chemistry and everything. That's the good thing. Like with Jackson Arnold, we talk about, he's been throwing to these wide receivers even before he took the starting job. So he's thrown to Farouk, he's thrown to Andrew Anthony, Jaden Gibson, unfortunately, is who's out, but Nick Anderson, Jaquez Petaway, Brennan Thompson. We've seen him have a collaborative type play. JJ Hester, they've built relationship and rapport over the last year, right? So Quinn's going to figure out this chemistry over the last, 6-7 months. We'll see what that looks like. But their secondary has always been questionable, right? They lost a lot of players. They had a few starters that hit the portal. They hit the portal because they felt like they were going to be jumped by somebody else. But still, the guys that got out there now hadn't started before. And, the question is, will they be able to adapt and re-ready to play today? I think for me going into the game, if there wasn't so many freebies in there, Tyree Walker dropping the touchdown at the end of the half, the score would have definitely been a much different score overall. Probably wouldn't have been more points. It actually would have been less because the lead would have been so much higher at that time. But I digress. I am in your boat too, mindset that Oklahoma still does have a chance to win this game. I'm not saying we will, but we have a very good chance of winning it like we did last year, because all we're going to do is go out there and try to outmuscle them. We're going to push them around just like we did last year. And hopefully they were doing a whole bunch of crunches to try to keep up so that we could see who did more crunches and whose body's ready. And sounds like, I know that we did extra. Hopefully Texas did too.
Well, and the other part of this is it's going to be interesting to see what the national narrative is for both teams going into it. Texas has a big non-conference matchup with Michigan early in the season. Oklahoma is going to have big games against Tennessee and Auburn. Where are these teams ranked? Is it a top 10 matchup? Is it a top 25 matchup? I just think Oklahoma is going to still be considered underrated relative to Texas going into that game. They'll be considered the underdog no matter what happens those first 2 months of the season. But I just like Oklahoma's mentality going into this. I think after that 49-0 drubbing, everything kind of flipped for them as it regards to Texas. So it's going to be a good game, as it always is. It's going to probably be a tight game. But again, I think Oklahoma is going to have enough talent on both sides of the ball and enough of a mental edge to be able to come out and get this win.
That's possibly. And with that too, for Texas, one thing they have to also think about is who they play next week at home. They got Georgia coming into town. Right. So we'll know about what Texas is week 2 against Michigan. We'll know how physical they are in that game, because that's all Michigan is, 100% physical. Then when they play us, there's that potential for looking over us in preparation for Georgia coming into town. They've got a lot of adversity there to really consider, because our home game is against South Carolina, in which it's going to be a good matchup because they got some speedsters. I don't know if we're going to be as stressed as they are for Georgia.
That's right. And Brent Venables will be keeping them focused on the main thing.
The task at hand.
But Oklahoma fans aren't going to be sitting there thinking about South Carolina coming to town, whereas Texas fans will be thinking about Georgia coming to town. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts and make Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Also, for your second listen, make Locked On College Football that second listen. From NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Follow Jay on Twitter at Unfair Sports, myself at John9Williams. The show is at Locked On Sooners on all the socials. Again, hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. But until next time, he's Jay Smith. I'm John Williams. Boomer Sooner.